Okay, hello YouTube, and today we're going to be talking about an opening called the Nahkmanson Gambit. And if you haven't already and you like the content on my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'll try to keep more content like this coming. So, the Nahkmanson Gambit. I have to admit that the Nahkmanson Gambit is an opening that's really appealing. And it's even appealing to me. I want to make the Nahkmanson Gambit work. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to figure out how to do it. So that brings me to this video, how to refute the Nahkmanson Gambit and an alternative to the Nahkmanson Gambit. So the Nahkmanson is after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. This is the Italian game. And the appeal of the Italian game is a lot of us like to play the Evans Gambit, which is basically after bishop to c5, we play the move b4, and we get to play this super aggressive attacking position. We get to gambit a pawn, and we get to have a lot of fun. So naturally, if we play the Evans Gambit and we want to sacrifice a pawn and have a lot of fun, we would like to be able to sacrifice a pawn and have a lot of fun against alternatives that black can play here. So if black plays the two knights defense, we would like to also sacrifice a pawn and have a lot of fun. Now, when you're a kid and you're playing in scholastic tournaments, that's actually pretty easy to do because you probably have a lot of fun experiences and fond memories of something called the fried liver attack. At least I know I did when I was a kid. And the fried liver is one of the three main options that we have against the two knights defense. We have the moves knight g5, d3, and d4 are the three main options. And after the move knight g5, d5, e takes d5, the vast majority of kids' games will not follow one of the three main lines shown here. Instead, they will end up playing the move knight takes d5, which allows us to have the fun that we want to have. We get to sacrifice an entire piece with the move knight takes f7, king takes f7. We follow up with queen f3 check, king e6, and then we play knight c3. And we play for this huge attack that cost us a piece, but black's king is in the middle of the board, and we have more than enough compensation for this piece. And actually, in reality, the fried liver is fundamentally sound. I mean, computer analysis seems to back up that white's position is perfectly acceptable for the loss of this piece, even though black, in a lot of cases, will get to keep this piece for quite a long period of time. It doesn't seem like black's king will ever really find true safety, and because of this, white's position is really good. The problem comes back to those arrows a second ago. After the move e takes d5, the three main lines are letting white keep this pawn to play either knight d4, b5, or knight a5. Now, by far and away, the most common move that gets played on the master and grandmaster level, what you're going to see 80-90% of the time when you start playing higher level chess, is the move knight a5, and then the main line is bishop b5 check, c6, dc6, bc6, bishop e2, h6, and then there are two options here. Steinitz played the move knight h3, and Fischer copied him. He also played knight h3, and there is one really cool game in my 60 Memorable where Fischer gets a pretty good result with this move knight h3, but that's not just fallen out of fashion. It seems like knight h3 isn't a very good move for white, as it turns out. So we have to kind of fall back on the main line, which is knight f3, e4, knight e5, bishop d6, d4, e d3, knight d3, and then basically white has to play a few boring moves in a row. He's going to have to play h3 before he castles, and then he's going to have to play like b3, bishop b2, and knight c3, and basically just try to consolidate his pawn in this really boring position where his pieces don't really go past the third rank. And meanwhile, black is the one that gets to have all the fun. Black is down a pawn, and he's got tons of open files and open lines and open diagonals for his pieces. So you started off playing the Italian game hoping to play the Evans Gambit or something really aggressive, and then it turns out that black gets to gambit the pawn and play something aggressive against you. And of course, that's not really appealing. So if you have an Evans in your repertoire, you would really like to play something aggressive. So that's where the Nahkmanson comes in. It shows, okay, well, let's not play one of these boring openings, right? Let's not play d3, which is, of course, really boring. Like, we can play d3, and then after bishop c5, c3, we're basically playing a Roy Lopez-type position without playing the Roy Lopez. And when you do this, you have your c3, d3 pawn duo, and you just go into this long maneuvering game. So going back into this e takes d4 castles and then knight takes e4. The Nahkmanson is the idea of playing knight c3 first. And again, this is to kind of avoid the old boring mainline theory, which didn't used to be boring, but it is now, with rook e1, d5, and then you sack the bishop, queen takes, and then you bring your knight to c3. These positions are known to be equal, and just the theory on them is just spent. There's just nothing there. They've all been worked out. So the idea is you can play knight c3 and you can get this super exciting game. And certainly that's true if they take the knight with the pawn. If they play dc3, white's getting a ton of compensation for the material here. You know, it's almost fried liver-esque. We're going to play bishop takes f7, king f7, queen d5, and this king can either go back to e8 or he can come up to f6. And both are highly entertaining, and the computers don't really seem to know what's going on here. They seem to get a lot of the analysis and a lot of the positions wrong half the time. After king e8, the game almost plays itself. You will play rook e1, bishop g5, rook ae1, build up your attack very naturally. And after the king goes to f6, there appears to be two options. You can take on e4, just getting your piece back, and what's interesting about this is if they play h6, they immediately lose to knight h4, and of course h6 is a very natural move. So they have to play very precisely. They would have to play a move like, say, bishop e7 here, and then the idea is after knight g5, d5, and, you know, on the human level, this still leads to a very interesting game, since this king is still very exposed. But instead of queen takes e4, you also have the super interesting option of pawn takes c3, which is highly fascinating, and it might actually be good. So, I mean, this is super interesting. If they take the knight with the pawn, you get that super interesting, super complex game, unclear, even according to the computers, that you want. The problem comes if they take with the knight. And I honestly think that knight takes refutes the Nahkmanson Gambit. So, for starters, you still have a few traps that you can play for here. The first thing you should do is you shouldn't play bc3 right away, because after d5, bishop b5, you would like the move d takes c3 to lose to the move knight e5. But in this case, because you haven't played rook e1 yet, they're still able to actually play the move queen d6. So you have to get them to commit to the move bishop e7, so they still have at least one way to go wrong. So you should play the move rook e1 check, bishop e7, and then you should take on c3. d5, bishop b5, and then they still have one way to go wrong here. They can play d captures c3 question mark, and then you can play knight e5, which should be a winning maneuver. And the point is now if they play bishop d7, you're simply going to exchange everything, and then you're going to come in with the move bishop to a3, which basically just wins this bishop on e7 because there's nothing left to block on the e6 square. That would be great, except that it's pretty simple to refute the Nakmanson. All you got to do is castle. And I've played this position dozens of times against masters and international masters online, desperately trying to make this position work. And I've been working out the lines on the computer, working them out on Stockfish, trying to put Leela Chess 0 on it, doing everything I can to make this work, because I really want this aggressive option to work too. I can't come up with anything. I've tried c takes d4, I've tried bishop takes c6 right away, and then c takes d4. Nothing seems to work. Usually cd4, bishop g4 gets played, and then I've tried both taking on c6 or trying to just play kind of the normal. I've tried this with this position and then played h3, and then, unfortunately, if they want to, they can even just exchange, and this position should just be completely equal at best for white. At worst, white is still down this pawn. We have the same pieces pretty much, and the pawn structure is symmetrical. There's just not enough to write home about here. And the other option is we can try c3, and then we can follow up with aggressive looking moves like rook b1, bishop d3, and then maybe h3 or something. But none of this seems to compensate for not just the pawn, but the fact that black already has very aggressive looking pieces. He has a bishop that's pinning your knight and another bishop on this long diagonal. I hate to say it, but I think that black is simply better here, and I think that the move knight takes c3 with all of the proper moves in between, with castling and avoiding all these little traps, I think this is just clearly slight advantage black, and this should solidly refute the Nahkmanson Gambit. So that brings me back to, if you want to play something aggressive, and the Nahkmanson Gambit is no good, what should we be playing here as white? Well, I still recommend d4. I think this is the most aggressive try. And then I recommend the move e5. Now, normally this leads to what people would think is a boring position. They think of it as just kind of a position where white gets a little more space, very similar to a Scotch opening. So it would go like d5, bishop b5, knight e4, we take. Bishop d7, we take on c6, bc6, and we have this advanced pawn on e5. Notice it's a similar pawn structure to what we're aiming for in the Nahkmanson, but the pawn there would typically be on d4 instead of e5, and our b pawn would be gone. This is a little bit better. We have a more advanced pawn, and we're not down a pawn here. So from a fundamentally sound level, this is a much better way to go. So we would castle, bishop c5, we would play f3, kicking this knight, we would gain some more space, we'd bring our bishop into e3, and now there are ways here for black to go wrong, so this should be at least somewhat appealing. One interesting way for black to go wrong here is black could play the move pawn to f6, and then we can play the super aggressive and cool move pawn to b4. So just like the Nahkmanson, there's still ways for our opponent to go wrong here, which should make this opening appealing in the same way the Nahkmanson is appealing, in which people can go wrong and you can play cool moves. So b4 and then bishop takes b4, we can now throw in the move e6, bishop c8, knight c6 would actually be completely winning for white, which I think is pretty cool. So f6 would be a lemon, and also f5 for a completely different reason would be a lemon. Knight d2, castles, takes, and then c4, and white's pawn structure in the middle of the board is superior, and the computer actually gives this as +1 or even better for white. So the main line here is, of course, castles kingside, and then after knight d2, this typically leads to very boring positions. Again, f6 and f5 are both kind of soundly refuted. If f6, we're going to play knight e4, d4, queen e2, and if they try f5, this just transposes to the other line with c4, and white has an advantage in both cases. So pretty much everybody's playing the boring, knight takes d2, queen takes d2. And at this point, there's three main lines. There's f6, queen e7, and bishop b6. And you would think that whatever happens, it's just going to lead to some boring game where you just have a little bit more space in the middle. But I don't think that's necessarily true. And the reason is because there's still some unexplored territory here. The vast majority of strong players here are playing the move f6. And specifically against the move f6, the vast majority of strong players with white have just been playing the super boring positional move knight to b3. This is not necessary. There's a much lesser played move here, the move rook a e1, and it's super, like, the most natural move in the position, and almost nobody is playing this move. And not only is it the most natural move in the position, it's like the #1 recommendation if you run Stockfish and LCO side by side. They love this move. And I'm just going to show you a game where this was played, and I want to give credit where credit was due. This was actually a game played between two lesser-known masters in Jerusalem and Israel in 2013. It was played between Iran and Midland in Israel in 2013, and the game went rook ae1, fe5, fe5, rook f1 check, rook f1 check, queen e7. And what's amazing about this is black is playing all of the computer-recommended moves, but white has this absolutely amazing move, pawn to e6. And then after bishop d4, bishop d4, bishop e6, white simply plays queen c3, which threatens c6 and g7. And then after queen d7, white can actually follow through with the move bishop takes g7, super exclamation point. Queen takes g7, queen c6, and unbelievably enough, white is actually quite a bit better. He's getting his piece back, and after rook b8, queen e6, he has a huge advantage and a huge attack against this king to boot. So white actually has like a huge advantage here. And this is extremely trappy, and it's a way for black to go wrong again. As you can throw in this new move, you can throw in rook ae1. So in this video, it's kind of a good news, bad news thing. I feel like the Nahkmanson is soundly refuted until somebody shows me something differently. But I feel like you also have this amazing alternative that you can play with the white pieces that'll give you those same kind of attacking chances that you were getting out of the Nahkmanson Gambit, and you can still have that same type of fun chess that you wanted to play, that same type of fun, aggressive chess where your opponent has lots of chances to go wrong. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope I didn't throw too much cold water on your favorite gambits. And I hope that you learned something new about chess. And if you like this video and you like this content, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching.